Everybody has that one pesky muscle group that simply refuses to grow. And it can be largely due to genetics, but it also has a lot to do with your training history and what you've been doing in the gym. For me, it was my quads and my chest lagging far behind the rest of my physique, and it drove me insane. And it wasn't until I began programming intelligently that I was able to bring these body parts up, and pretty quickly relative to how long I spent bashing my head into a wall being like, why won't my chest grow? So in this video, I'm going to give you super tactical advice based off of science that we can use to bring up these lagging body parts and build that well-rounded, complete physique. My name's Amir Barber. I am a chemical engineer and a fitness educator, and this is how to bring up a lagging body part. So let's roll right into tactical tip number 1, which is exercise order, or the order in which we do exercises. So on a given day, let's say we have 5 exercises that we do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this first exercise that we do is going to be much more effective at stimulating muscle growth than this last exercise. And this is due to fatigue. And fatigue in a normal sense means, I'm getting kind of tired. And that's what it means in day-to-day life. However, the exercise science definition is a little bit more dialed, and it is a temporary and reversible reduction in exercise performance caused by a previous bout of exercise. So more plainly, we did something, like we did a set of whatever exercise, and it impacts our performance and lowers our performance on the next set. So as you're working your way through a workout, you are accruing more and more fatigue. And this is important because what fatigue does is it gets in the way of having maximum performance or maximum motor unit recruitment on your working sets. So in order to stimulate muscle growth maximally, we want maximum levels of performance. And as we work our way through the workout, our performance is decreasing because of fatigue. So if you have a lagging body part, you want to put those exercises earlier in the workout. So for example, if I have a push day that's kind of full body where I'm doing chest, shoulders, quads, and triceps, okay? In my example, my chest and my quads were lagging behind my shoulders and my triceps. So I would put my chest and quad work towards the beginning of the workout, and then I'd put my shoulder and triceps work towards the end of the workout. This way, I am prioritizing growth in the lagging body parts. Tactical tip number 2 is allocating the frequency and the volume at which you hit that muscle group accordingly. So how often are we hitting the muscle? And when we do hit it, how much are we doing? And when we refer to volume, I'm going to refer to the number of working sets that we're doing. And before I start throwing numbers at you guys, I want to put the caveat that this is highly individualized. Okay, so this comes down to the individual. So like, what's your physiology? What's your fiber type proportion? What's your exercise selection? Like, what movements are you choosing to do? How hard are you actually training? What are you coordinated at the movements that you're deciding to do? All of these play into account about how much volume should we do per week. So I'm going to give guidelines that I think are really, really good starting points for most people, but understand that this is inherently an individualized thing. So overall, you want to spread about 6 to 10 hard working sets for that specific muscle group over the course of 2 to 3 sessions. So first, let's tackle frequency. Why do we want to train this muscle group multiple times per week rather than one? And ultimately, this answer circles back to fatigue, which is a monster of a subject that I'm not going to discuss at length. But know this, let's just say on a given day, I am doing a bench press for my chest, okay? That first working set is very stimulating relative to all of the following working sets. So let's say from that first working set that I took to failure, I get one arbitrary unit of muscle growth, this much, okay? In order to get double that, so we get both of them, you would have to do 5 additional sets. Not all sets are created equal. As you continue doing sets of the same exercise, the growth stimulus decays rapidly. Okay, so to get the same growth stimulus as your first working set, you'd have to do 5 additional sets within that same session. However, what we can do is do one working set here Right? Our first hard working set, get this 1 unit of muscle growth, then we could wait a few days and then do another first set. So we were able to get better muscle growth outcomes from doing less work. So it's a no-brainer to spread your volume over the course of the week. And there are other reasons as well, such as how long does that growth phase last after your workout? Right? So let's just say it's 48 hours, depending on how many sets you did. So you could be growing for 48 hours, and then you recover just in time to hit it again, and you grow for another 48 hours, right? So you have more growth time over the course of a week, rather than just dumping it all on Monday. And I think the sweet spot for most people is twice a week when it comes to frequency, because if you go up to 3 times, you have to be very dialed about your rest day so that you're actually recovering before your next session. So that's frequency. Let's hit this muscle group twice per week. For the weekly volume, we want to take that 6 to 10 hard working sets and spread it out over the course of the week. So if we were doing 2 sessions across the course of the week, we could do 3 sets and 3 sets to give us a total of 6, or 5 and 5 to give us a total of 10. And when it comes to volume, I recommend starting low and then going up, because it's not so much about the actual quantity of sets you're doing, it's much more about the quality, right? So if your sets are very high quality, meaning you're rested going into them, you've warmed up properly, and you're pushing intensely, you probably don't need as much as you think that you do. And in fact, you would be much better off with a lower volume approach with high quality and high intensity than just throwing sets at the wall and trying to see what sticks. And let progressive overload be your North Star. So if you start at 3 and 3 per week and you're consistently getting stronger, adding weight or reps, then you're good. Keep it at there and just grind. Tactical tip number 3 is rest days and recovery. So muscle growth actually occurs after the gym, when you're recovering, all right? So you never want to hit the same muscle group twice per week on back-to-back days. Spread those days out, okay? And that's generally why I recommend 2 days over 3 days, because the spacing of the 3 days needs to be really dialed depending on how much volume you're doing on each day, okay? So if you're gonna go with twice per week, try spreading it out relatively evenly over the course of the week, like Monday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Friday, things like that. Give your body, at least 48 to 72 hours to recover between sessions. Again, this is going to be dependent on how much volume you do on each day. If you do more volume, you'll need more time to recover. And if you're doing a lot less volume, you need less time to recover. Tactical tip number 4 is avoid exercise redundancy. And when I say redundancy, I'm referring to using multiple exercises to train the same exact function of the muscle. So for example, let's say on Monday, I'm going to do my 5 hard working sets of chest. I would not want to do 3 sets of a flat machine press and then 3 sets of a flat dumbbell press. We are training the chest through the same range of motion and pretty much the same resistance profile, meaning that we are doing 5 sets of the same exercise basically. So instead, you want to choose exercises that are complementary, that do something slightly different and train the chest in a different way. So I might do a flat barbell bench press that's going to bias the lengthened position or the stretched position of the chest. And then I might do some type of fly that is going to emphasize the mid to shortened range and really challenge the chest in its squeezed position. So those 2 exercises do different things, and we want to incorporate both of those types. Let's take the quads for another example. Let's say we had 4 working sets on a given day. I wouldn't want to do a quad bias leg press then a quad bias Smith machine squat on the same day, because they're both training the same function of the quads and challenging the quads in their stretched position. Instead, I would want to choose one of these squatting or pressing type patterns and then do a leg extension, which is going to hit the quads in a shortened position and also train the rectus femoris. Tactical tip number 5, you need to understand that pesky muscle and how best to train it. As Sun Tzu once wrote in The Art of War, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And that seems kind of applicable here, right? If it's you versus this lagging body part, how do you expect to get it to grow without really understanding it and understanding the best way to actually target it? And this is kind of a monster of a subject. So whichever lagging body part is your lagging body part, I have a masterclass video for you that will cover everything you need to know about the muscle group and also show you which exercises that I would say are the best or a really good starting point for most people. But I'll go into one example. Let's say we're talking about the hamstrings. We really want to grow our hamstrings, and this is very common with bodybuilders, okay? We need to understand that the hamstrings cross two joints. They cross both the knee and the hip joint, so they can influence the knee and the hip. And to get total growth across the whole hamstrings, then we have to train the knee flexion component. We have to train it with like a seated leg curl or a lying leg curl. And then we also have to train the hip extension component through something like a stiff-legged deadlift. And then we have to know how to do these exercises well so the resistance gets delivered where we want it to be. So understand the muscle. And I'll throw a bunch of links down below for masterclasses of various muscles. Here's all of the advice I gave you condensed down to one paragraph so you can begin implementing it today. 1. Put your lagging body parts towards the beginning of your workout. 2. Spread 6 to 10 hard working sets over the course of 2 to 3 sessions. I recommend 2, and I recommend starting low with volume and working your way up to 10 if need be. Prioritize progressive overload. 3. Do not train the muscles on back-to-back days. No bueno. 4. Avoid exercise redundancy. Within a single session, if you're doing 2 or more exercises, make sure they're each doing something differently or challenging the muscle in a different way. And number 5, know the muscle and its different functions and how to train it effectively. And I'll leave you with one more quote by Orson Scott Ford. In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment, I also love him. I have to say, after figuring out my quad and my chest training, they became my favorite muscles to train. And you might find the very same. And I hope this video helps you in doing so. Until next time, peace.